Hello everybody, welcome back. In this class, I am going to explain about servlet context. An object of servlet context is created by the web container at the time of deploying the project. And this object can be used to get configuration information from web.xml file. And there is only one servlet context object per web application. If any information is shared to many servlets, then it is better to provide it from web.xml file using the context param element. And advantages are easy to maintain. If any information is shared to all the servers, it is better to make it available for all the servers. And we provide this information from web.xml file. So if the information is changed, we don't need to modify the server. Thus it removes the maintenance problem. Whenever the web application is deployed in the server, then the web container first reads the web.xml, that is deployment descriptor file, and it immediately creates the servlet context object without waiting for a request. The web container creates one servlet context object for one web application. If 10 web applications are deployed in server, then container creates 10 servlet context objects. Servlet context object is one for each web application per JVM. Servlet context is shareable object across all the servlets of web application. As part of web application, the first object created by the container is servlet context object only. For each servlet container creates its own servlet config objects, but all the servlets of the web application share a single servlet context object. Since servlet config is executed only once in the init method, and if we want servlet config to execute multiple times, we have to write it in the service method. And context object is in a web application is used for sharing data from one servlet to other servlet in a web application. Context object always stores data in the form of key value pairs. Into context object, the data can be added in two approaches, that is either declarative or programmatic data. Declarative means passing the data from web.xml into context object in the form of key value pair. Programmatic means passing the data from servlet into context object in the form of key value pairs. And if the data is added into context object from web.xml, then it is known as parameter of context object. If the data is added into context object from servlet, then it is known as attributes of the context object. A context object stores both the parameters and attributes. From web.xml, if we want to add any key value pair into context object, then we need to use context param element. The context param element is similar to init param element, but the difference is that context param is global to all the servers, that is declared outside the servlet tag in the web.xml, whereas init param is local to all the servlet and declared inside the servlet tag in web.xml. In web.xml, we can pass any number of context parameters. And these context parameters are passed inside the root element, that is the web app. And so this is about the, so now we'll see the differences between config, servlet config and servlet context. In servlet config is the one for each servlet. Servlet config is for each servlet. That is, it is local. Whereas servlet context is for each web application. That is, it is global. And servlet config is local to each servlet, so it is not shareable. Whereas servlet context is global to each servlet, so it is shareable. And servlet config does not exist without a servlet object, whereas servlet context can exist without servlet object. Servlet config does not support attributes, whereas servlet context supports attributes. So this is about the differences between servlet config and the servlet context. I will show an example for the servlet context. there is some problem. I will open the Eclipse again. It's taking some time to open the Eclipse. So now I'll explain this concept of servlet context. So first create a dynamic web project of servlet context. Then inside the source, you have a servlet context example. Then inside the web content, you have web.inf. Inside web.inf, you have web.xml. So you see this web.xml inside the servlet tag, you have only the servlet name and the servlet class as servlet context example. Then in the servlet tag, then this context param is taken outside the servlet tag. Whereas init parameters should be local, that is they should be taken inside the servlet tag. Context param is global, they should be taken outside the servlet tag. So context param name is dname, param value is the name of the MySQL driver, that is com.mysql.jdbc.driver. And one more parameter is context param name is username is system, and another context param is param name password, and password is Oracle. And this is the servlet context example. Public class servlet context example extends HTTP servlet. Public void deleted HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response, throw servlet exception, IO exception. Response dot set the content type as text slash HTML. Then print writer out equal to response dot get writer to print on the console, output on the console. Then create an object for servlet context. Context is equal to get servlet context. Then enumeration e equal to context dot get init parameter name. Since we have multiple init context params, so in order to get all the context params here, we need to use this method get init parameter names. This will be stored in the enumeration object. And string str equal to null while e dot has more elements. This is checking the condition whether enumeration has more elements. And if string equal to e dot next element, then out dot bring the context dot get any parameter of string. So now I'll run this. So now I'll run this servlet context. Then select this Tomcat server and select the servlet context here, the particular project, and say finish. So now the servlet, now the Tomcat server is started here. So now you directly get the output like password and the driver name and the username. So these are the context parameters. So this is about servlet context. Hope you understood and continue in the next class. Okay, thank you.